as an art teacher, grading typically is not a big time expenditure to those who know what to look for. So ultimately, there's still the check marks that need to be reached in classes. Did the student do this? Yes or no? Did they do this? Yes or no? And so those become the areas upon which students are graded upon. And for some students, it takes them a long time, and they develop it and make it look good. For other students, they just hit the check marks as quickly as possible and then turn in whatever they basically just crapped out. And so when that happens, they can do it very quickly, and that gives them a lot of time to just sit around doing nothing. And they argue back with the, well, I did what you asked. And so art becomes this endeavor to increase the process, spend more time in the process, looking at the process as a bigger picture, literally and figuratively. So spend a little bit more time on this. But the problem is that if you just go by the check marks, then it becomes necessary to push them or to influence them, encourage them, whatever word you want to use, goad them, nag them, whatever, to do more and to do better. But this knocks on the doorstep of the idea versus extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. So the people who have extrinsic motivation, they're just trying to do the bare essentials, the bare necessities. Whereas the people that are intrinsically motivated, they want to do it to be in the process. And so it kind of be looking like, using the analogy of hiking, if I'm going on a hike just to finish the hike, just to say, oh yeah, I did that section, or I did that in this time, that's it. But if you go on hikes specifically just to be on the trail, to be outside, to be in that practice, that process, then it doesn't matter what the trail is, where the trail is, as long as you get to do it. I mean, that's some effect, of course, but ultimately the desire to be in process of hiking becomes the major desire. And I believe that's the intrinsic versus the extrinsic. The extrinsic is, I want to finish this. I want to be done with that. So I want that check mark. I want to be recognized for that. But the intrinsic is, I just want to be there. I would just want to do that thing. So likewise in art, it's the same way. But the problem is that getting that intrinsic motivation takes time. You need to ease into it. It's something that you kind of build up. So for example, like, there's two ways to look at this. The first way is knowing what you're doing. Because if you're knowing what you're doing, then you have the flexibility to work around or to know how the process goes. So in an art context, you need your pencil, your eraser, your piece of paper, your sketchbook, maybe paints, and then you got to set up your palette and have the water bucket and the different types of brushes you need, some paper towel, whatever. So there's this setup, right? And so that's the first part of it. The second part is knowing how to use the media, the techniques, if you will. And so learning how to do this, and if you screw it up, you can work around it, or you can augment it, or you can include it, or maybe you play off that, whatever. But you have to have this level of understanding of what is going on to make these adjustments. And you need to be taught that not everything's going to be turned out exactly what you imagined it or what you wanted it to be. You're going to have to make some forfeitures. So there's going to be a level of, okay, it's not going to look exactly like this. And that's very troublesome for younger students, especially like if they're trying to draw something and another kid comes up to them and says, what's that? Or a teacher comes up and they're like, oh, that's a beautiful, and they guess and it's completely wrong from what the kid was drawing. And so the kid will either concede to, that's the word I was looking for, concede to the fact that, oh, that's what the teacher says it is, so I better just call it that, because otherwise I'm going to be wrong. Or I need to concede to the fact that this doesn't look right because that kid thought it looked bad. And this can lead you to the point of just stopping, not wanting to do it. Conceding that you're not good, when really it's a process. And then the third is getting to that level where you get into that flow state, if you will, like that state where nothing else matters and you're really interested in what's going on. Your focus is there. So that takes time, and unfortunately that's something that needs to be nurtured, to be developed, because once you have a comfort with it, then it's either easier to get set up and be ready and get into this position, and it's easy for you to continue in this. Like, it doesn't become stopping points, like, oh no, I made this mark here, that's totally wrong, and become frustrated and tear it up or break it or throw it away and start all over again. To use a different analogy, like if you're running a race, if you fall down or trip or something, you don't go back to the finish line. You keep going until you get to the end. And yeah, maybe that wasn't your best time, but then you do it again and you do it again, and you get used to this cadence, this movement, this flow. And so that takes exercise. Like if you're just starting out running, you have to exercise to the point where you can forget, oh man, this sucks, I can't breathe right, and my legs are tired, and blah blah blah. But those who run for a long time or build up that exercise, that tolerance, that strength, they can just go and they just want to be in that situation, that flow. So this takes time, and there's some trials, and there's some things that are going to behoove you. And so getting students to stay in that flow state is where intrinsic motivation is developed or grown, birthed. Because like you have to get to that state of getting enjoyment, or I want to solve this problem, or oh, I want to do this, or I want to get this done, or I want to see how this turns out, or I want to do this action more, or this feeling more, because that's what it comes down to. Whether it's intrinsic or extrinsic, it's a feeling of success, of pleasure, of satisfaction is a great word. So like getting to be satisfied. So you look at technologies like Instagram or YouTube or TikTok or Snapchat, and they all have it in common, this immediate gratification that if you don't like this one, you just keep swiping, and then there's this anticipation built of maybe I'll find something good, or maybe I'll find the next one will be funny too, or interesting too, or I'll learn something from this one, or blah blah blah. So you've got this anticipation and immediate gratification that can be achieved through this, and it's not allowing this level of intrinsic motivation to be birthed and nurtured, because it's an external force. And ultimately, with this, the students, the people, whoever, engaging in particularly the way that social media is, and I'm just as much a culprit as anybody else, that you're searching for this external force to give you stimulation, to give you satisfaction. But when that's all you have, this emptiness grows, because you're always looking for something else to fill you, to satisfy you. Something else outside of you has to give you that satisfaction, instead of building the intrinsic motivation and self-satisfaction. And ultimately, this could have a great deal of effect of relationship to depression. I mean, I don't know the statistics offhand, but maybe I'm completely wrong on this, but it seems like the level of depression is increasing dramatically throughout the years. And it's because there's nothing that is internally causing satisfaction, in my opinion. That if you don't have things that you feel good about, or you and I don't like to use the word pride, because pride's before the fall, but ultimately things that you like to do of your own volition, and that you feel satisfied with. And that's a better word, not proud. Satisfied. I'm satisfied with what I'm doing. I like being here. I like doing this. And that's heavy into this idea of like getting students and people in general to understand what they like, and not what is being imposed upon them to like. Oh, people like this person because they dress this way, act this way, look this way, behave this way, so I better act like that too. So these extrinsic motivations are short-term at best, and there's always a desire for more and more. I guess it's got a relation to monetary gain, like, oh, if I dress like this, act like this, I'll be happy because I'll have more. Whatever more may be. And usually it's things that could be bought, or having money or something. You get these people that I'll be happy when I have money, but look at those people. Anyways, so this idea of extrinsic versus intrinsic motivation becomes the challenge for the art teacher, or any teacher for that matter. But then it's a level of connection too. So there's this question of, hey, I need to be able to connect this kid with this media, this thing that I'm using to make stuff, and teaching them the technique, how to use the media, so that they can make the subject matter whatever it is that they like or are interested in or want to make. So the problem is, if you've got kids that are, or people that are looking at external satisfaction, that's immediate gratification, building that level of intrinsic motivation so that they can be satisfied with what they are doing in themselves, self-motivation, that's the struggle. And so there's this question, and this is contrary to not a lot, but a popular belief today, that kids need to just be unparented, unguided. They'll figure it out. It's not my job to do this. But ultimately, children are children, and they're being taught by social media more than they are a human being, or a direct human being, or somebody that's got their best interests at heart. And so getting them to this point of intrinsic motivation, and then guiding them into what they like, what they're interested in, what their aptitudes are, what they have a lot of experience with, is the only way, it's a primary way to get them to the point where they will be successful as adults. Oh, when I get out of school, I was really good at this, and I learned intrinsic motivation to keep going and persevere, and I gained satisfaction by the struggle and the challenges that it ensues in learning about this, growing in this, and then pairing them with an occupation that aligns with this. That takes motivation and effort and exercise in this intrinsic motivation. It's something that has to be developed and strengthened. So the quandary then is getting the kids over this hump of the struggle, the not knowing how to use the media, the inability to exercise different perspectives of how this could be done if I make a mistake, or this didn't work out the way that I liked it, or I don't like what's happening. Like, to be okay with that and push through to the point where I just want to be doing this, and if I do this and I work hard in it, it will inevitably turn out good. You can't not. You're just getting practice. You're developing to do more and to do better. So, do we force them? Do we require it of them? Because we can't physically force them as teachers. And there's some people that say that people need to be given the choice. But I think there's a level of they need to do this because maybe they don't have the intrinsic motivation themselves. So thinking about depression, you have to dig your way out of depression, metaphorically speaking, because you have no motivation, or you find no inner worth or inner happiness, right? And ultimately, in my belief, the primary culprit of this depression that seems to be so rampant in our day and age is kids aren't being taught to find intrinsic value, intrinsic motivation. They're looking for external motivation, and when they're not getting it, then they don't know where to go. So they're constantly searching, and through the searching, this void gets bigger and bigger and bigger. I mean, look at bad relationships. This search to fill this void of anybody that'll show me any type of love. But along with that, you've got these negative, toxic things that are happening that broaden this hole, this abyss. So the only way that does not have religious implications, and ultimately this is where this all comes from too, is like finding the meaning, is finding self-value. And that means looking at who you are and saying, what can I do? What problems do I like to overcome? What I like to deal with, that I like to correct. Correct's not the word. Investigate, maybe. And getting this intrinsic value that wants to keep you moving to the point where when you have that opportunity, you have a passion for it. You're like, oh, I want to get to work right away so I can work on this as much as I can and get as much done and see what interesting things can develop out of this pursuit of satisfaction, not happiness, because it's not always happy. Sometimes it's angry, sometimes it's sad, sometimes it's fearful. Yeah, there's happiness too, but that's the goal of life, isn't it? It's this teaching art as teaching life. But to do that, people need to find the worth of doing. So the goal then has to be to set extrinsic motivation long enough that the intrinsic motivation can take over. Like, here's the carrot just long enough that they get moving, and then once they're moving, pull the carrot away and allow them to realize that the whole world is the carrot, the whole action's the carrot, the whole process is the carrot. I don't need that carrot, I got this. So yeah, that's probably got to be the answer. So that's all I have to say about that. Thank you for your time and your attention. Do more, do better.